Nobody's ever sure about that one.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise on adjournment to raise urgent concern about the findings of the report of the Auditor-General No. 3 of 2025-26 on the proposed sale of Wilkinsons Point land, which was tabled in this place and published yesterday, 24 September 2025. Mr. President, I appreciate the indulgence of the House as I put on the record my concerns and desperately urge the government to make a commitment that it will not proceed any further with the proposed sale until it can demonstrate the application of a legitimate land disposal process and that any sale is in the best interests of Tasmanians. The findings of the Auditor-General's report into the proposed sale of land at Wilkinsons Point are deeply concerning and substantiate the serious concerns I raised about the process in February this year. The Auditor-General's investigation found: 1, there was no business case to support the implementation of the sale proposal. 2, the assessment of the proposal against the unsolicited proposal's assessment criteria was inadequate. The Coordinator-General, who is responsible for receiving unsolicited proposals and for coordinating the assessment process according to the unsolicited proposal's policy and guidelines, was not even involved. 3, conflicts of interest were not well managed, with the proponent providing benefits to department employees who are involved in project negotiations. 4, the valuation report was shared with the proponent against the Valuer-General's advice that doing so is a potential misuse of information. And 5, the government restricted the Auditor-General's access to cabinet documentation, among other findings. These are deeply concerning findings, Mr. President. Following the government's 23rd of February 2025 announcement that it had agreed to sell the land to LK Group, I raised concerns as a member of the Public Accounts Committee, and the committee subsequently commenced a targeted inquiry. The response to the committee's inquiry to date can be accessed via the Public Accounts Committee webpage. I also requested and received a briefing from the Department of State Growth Secretary on 20th of May this year, who informed me that the proposed sale was allowed to be undertaken without putting the land to market because it was appropriately progressing through the unsolicited proposals process. The Auditor-General's report tells a different story, doesn't it? Not only does the report validate the concerns I raised, but heightens them, given the uncertainty about how the government intends to proceed from here in relation to the proposed sale of land at Wilkinsons Point. The lack of due process and transparency by the government is simply not acceptable and does nothing but further erode community trust in government. Restricting the Auditor-General's access to cabinet documents can only leave the community wondering what the government is trying to hide. The fact that the government provided the land valuation to the proponent after receiving advice from the Valuer-General that it should not be shared is completely incomprehensible. Mr. President, Tasmanians simply deserve better when it comes to protecting their interests in negotiating deals. We all know this isn't the first example of a bad deal being negotiated by this government without proper advice, but I won't digress. Despite the February announcement that the deal had been done, thankfully it would appear the Wilkinsons Point land has not yet been sold. In fact, according to the information that was able to be sourced through the Auditor-General's investigation, the government is only at stage 1 of a 9-stage legislated land sale process, which is Parties Agree Master Plan. I note the Minister for Parks, incorporating Crown Land, was not able to answer my question this afternoon. I note he's not in the chamber, but I do hope he's listening. He was not able to answer my question as to whether the master plan had been agreed, stating this is outside of his remit. During question time this afternoon, the Minister did confirm the sale agreement has not yet been finalised. However, I note he didn't answer my question as to whether a sale agreement has been drafted. Further to the finding, Mr. President, that the sale has not yet occurred, the briefing to MPs this morning that the Auditor-General informed members that no sale agreement was cited through the investigation. So how are we to know for sure whether a draft sale agreement exists or not, given the Auditor-General's access to cabinet documents was restricted and the Minister did not answer the question? Mr. President, Tasmanians deserve better than this when it comes to transparency and accountability. The Minister for Parks, incorporating Crown Land, could not answer my questions this afternoon as to whether the government intends to proceed with the proposed sale of land to LK Group, as per its 23rd of February announcement, or whether the government is satisfied that any proposed sale could actually legally proceed given the process failures identified through the Auditor-General's investigation. Apparently, I need to ask the Premier and/or Treasurer these questions, and indeed I will. The urgency of me speaking on this, Mr. President, is because I fear a deal could be done any day without appropriate process, scrutiny and transparency.
Behind closed doors, surely.
as happened with the AFL deal. Shining a light on this in this place today will hopefully put the government on notice that this would not be acceptable. Before it proceeds any further, it remains incumbent on the government to fully explain to Tasmanians whether the proposed deal can legally proceed given the process failures to date. If indeed it can legally proceed, the government must demonstrate the proposed sale and the associated terms and conditions are in the public interest. Or, Mr President, it must go back to the drawing board and follow due process. Mr President, I welcome the government recognising the significant potential of Wilkinsons Point as an area ripe for development, and I recognise the benefits of development of this area could deliver. However, Tasmanians can rightly expect the government to engage with proponents and the community in a legitimate and transparent way to realise the utmost benefits for the Glenorchy and Greater Hobart community and Tasmanians more broadly in any sale and development of land at Wilkinsons Point. Again, I urge the government to commit that it will not proceed any further with the proposed sale until it can demonstrate the application of a legitimate land disposal process and that any sale is in the best interests of Tasmanians. Thank you, Mr President.
Questions at the